Ladies and gentlemen, on the line, I have Dustin. What's up, man?
Oh, how's it going, man?
It's going great, going great. Thank you so much for joining the program, man. So what caught my eye when I saw your post was some old flyers and old pictures of a crew that I vaguely remember. I remember the name, and it was 8 Ball Posse. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but 8 Ball Posse started out as a hip-hop crew, a breaking crew, a wild style crew. They turned into what was known as 8 Ball Posse. They threw parties all around the city and surrounding cities. So I definitely want to talk about that the majority of the time, but let's go all the way back, man. Let's take it back. Were you born in Southern California?
Yeah, I was born in Bellflower and raised in Norwalk.
Kaiser,
So
I'm assuming,
pretty much
right?
I was born in Bellwood General.
Gotcha.
A little ass hospital.
Gotcha. Okay.
But yeah, but raised in Norwalk. But, and then I left Norwalk at 18.
Okay. So Norwalk in the 80s was probably a very interesting place. I'm more of a 90s kid, so I'm not too familiar about the 80s in Norwalk, but can you just talk to us about what it was like growing up in Norwalk around that time, 70s and 80s?
Yeah, no doubt. I was born in 71, so I caught some of the old school gangbanging shit, but in the 80s, that's when gangbanging really got popular, but also, breaking too. But they kind of were, in Norwalk, there's a lot of gang neighborhoods there, not as many as most cities in LA, but they got a handful, that are serious and shit. And, growing up in a gang neighborhood, it's a little sketchy. I grew up in a neighborhood, but, I was always enthralled by New York City breaking, and some of the other dudes I knew were into it too. And probably around 13, me and some dudes, and I'm not even sure how this actually started, just probably guys in elementary school and then eventually high school. We used to all break, and all different races too, Mexicans, blacks, half-breeds, whites, you name it, you know what I mean? We pretty much were accepting of everybody, but that's kind of the way breaking was back then, which was a little bit different because, Norwalk is, well, especially at that time, was predominantly Mexican or Chicano, and then, Mexicans from Mexico, and then whites, and blacks were probably the last there, and Asians too, but we used to go all over the city on the Norwalk Transit bus, on beach cruisers. We practiced 2 times a week. We got the name Wild Style Crew, and probably 5 or 6 of the members from that went into 8 Ball Posse. But 8 Ball Posse started at Norwalk High School. Mostly, guys that loved hip hop, and all the parties back then were high energy disco type parties. You know what I mean? Post disco, but there's a kind of disco in the 80s with high hair and, high energy. And those were the backyard parties back then. And all of us, we wanted to throw hip hop parties. So, that's where we started. But, breaking definitely was, for probably 3 years of my life, probably 12 to 15. That's pretty much all I did. We practiced, 2-3 times a week. We, all over the city. It was a lifestyle, And then also what was cool about that era is that little period of time right there. A lot of guys didn't gangbang, it's not like they weren't in gangs, but it seemed like that period of time, guys kind of calmed down. They were, a lot of cholos were poppers, and, some dudes were into breaking, and like the racial barriers were a little cool at the time, you know what I mean? And as living in LA, Mexican gangs are not cool with outsiders really, you know what I mean? Like, whether it's blacks or Mexicans from Mexico or any, El Salvador, whoever it is, unless you're in their gang, because every cholo gang has a black guy, has a white guy. You know what I mean? They all have their representative of, predominantly Chicano, but we always wanted to have everybody, that was pretty much, even 8 Ball Posse was the same way. And it became a problem later, because everybody knows once you, especially if you're doing any dirt or anything, you go to jail, you're going to have to deal with, all the cliques in there and whatever, the politics and shit. So we all kind of knew that if we ever got locked up or whatever, we can't really, if you're black, I can't talk to you, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm a half-breed. I'm half Mexican, half white. So then you got to even pick there too. What are you going to, but I always pretty much grew up Mexican. So I would roll that way. But, breaking, man, was a huge influence on me. First New York, but LA, and, New York, it had already died out, and LA probably had a good 3-year run after that, and it was everywhere, man. I remember the movie Breaking coming out, and that represents LA. But I do remember loving Beat Street and then seeing Breaking and being like, this is a bad representative of
corny.
LA.
Little corny.
It's kind of corny. Other than Boogaloo Shrimp, you know, I love the Boogaloo Shrimp. I loved, I think, Little Pepe, one of the little Mexican kids
he
in
was
there.
hard.
Yeah, and
Hot
I remember
he went by Hot Top.
Yeah, there's some of those dudes would show up in Norwalk sometimes, every once in a while. I mean, I used to go to Skate Depot. I don't know if you ever remember Skate Depot and Cerritos. Yeah. So they would have a breaking night every Wednesday. They would clear out no skating, and it was just I don't know what DJs would be there because I was a kid. I would get dropped off there, and those guys there were so good. Like there were some legends there, man. Little Pepe, White Boy Roy, Little Victor. There was dudes that I would just go watch. You know what I mean? And like still moves. You know what I mean? Really, just like see what these guys are doing and be like, holy shit. You know what I mean? Like and I would take it back to my guys and we'd all try it. You know what I mean? And everybody kind of had a move that they would do, and some guys were better than others and shit. And you know, like it was a fucking lifestyle for real. You know, it was a great era.
Man, it sounds like a blast, homie.
It was fun, bro.
Where were you guys consuming your hip hop from? You know, in the early mid '80s. You know, it's not like today when we can go on Spotify and listen to any song we want. Not even like the '90s. You know, there was not too many mix shows out there. Like, where were you guys consuming your hip hop from mainly?
KDAY. Like so, K-Day, which was on on AM. Yeah, Greg Mack, Bobby Jimmy. You know, so a lot of K-Day. When K-Day first came out, everybody's listening to that. At night on K-Day, they would play some shit called Uncle Jam's Army live from Casa Camino Real.
Of course, man.
You know, which I didn't even know where Casa Camino Real was. You know what I mean? But we would hear that. That would come on every like fucking Saturday night. We tape it, listen to it. You know what I mean? Also, back then too, everybody was just videotaping anything they could find. Any kind of breaking. If I'd see breaking on Soul Train, like New York City Breakers on Soul Train, somebody would tape it, and then we'd all just sit around and watch it and shit. You know what I mean? Anything, literally, like the fucking, I think it was a Lionel Richie video had some breaking in it all night long. There was a Robert Plant video that had breaking in it. Yeah, people, anything you could find, we were fucking into it. But mostly we're listening to New York hip hop back then. You know, BDP or well, I mean, you know, the first breaking music was probably like, you know, Planet Rock, White Lines, you know, shit like The Message, you know, all that early shit. When Run DMC's album came out, Rock the Bells, that shit, Beastie Boys, when it first came out. I mean, yeah, but a lot of it was New York at first, you know what I mean? And then the the LA underground stuff was probably like Uncle Jam's Army, you know, that was probably like super big. Toddy T, you know, I don't know if those are breaking, you know, probably breaking groups, but
Bataram.
I mean, the Bataram. I mean, I still listen to all that hip hop shit. Like, I mean, all the old shit, like, you know, all the shit that was on like fucking albums, you know, like, cause also I used to go to Norwalk Records a lot, you know, and pick up albums, even though I have a lot of money, but you know, anything that had to do with Africa Bambaataa, I was a big fan of, you know, that's big time breaking music. Renegades of Funk, you know, like I say, Planet Rock, Looking for the Perfect Beat, all that shit.
We got to talk about Norwalk Records, legendary record shop. And not only that, they morphed into a record label later on in the 90s when I started being familiar with them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They had a couple. They had Norwalk's Most Wanted. It was obviously.
Oh, yeah. I knew some guys from Norwalk's Most Wanted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
no totally. Shit, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that tape.
Watakami, yeah.
I remember that tape specifically.
I got that tape. I live in Phoenix now, and I got that tape in Phoenix at a record store here. Like, I seen it here in Phoenix. Yeah. They were tight.
That's crazy. Talk to us about Norwalk Records, what you remember, man. Like anything, just any story, anything you remember about Norwalk Records.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I used to just go in there just like anybody else back then and just go through all the albums. One of the big deals at Norwalk Records was Teen Angel magazines. And then also all these mixtapes they would have, right? They would have tapes that were like these volumes. I'm not even sure they were legal back then, but it would say like,
no, they were all bootlegs.
Yeah, there would be like, it would be the real songs, but it would be like hip hop something volume 1, you know, volume 2. And so you'd get a lot of fucking cuts that were from different groups, like Ghetto Boys, different shit that I'd never heard. You know what I mean? Some good, a lot bad. But, you know, we'd buy these tapes, filter through them, find out which ones that were good. And then a lot of times back then I was making just my own tapes off a double cassette. You know, once you got a double cassette, then you could like start just making your own tapes and giving them out and shit. You know what I mean? Keep making the love tapes too, you know, slow jam tapes. Yeah, that's what Norwalk Records, to me, the biggest thing they did there was sell those fucking mixtapes, man. Homie's Favorite Soul. I mean, there's oldie ones of, you know, volumes of oldies, volumes of fucking hip hop. You know, all that shit was great. I mean, I used to go there when it was, I think it was on Front Street originally, and it was an old bank that was fucking, at the time, was fucking broke down. Like the ceiling was busted. We're talking like in the 80s and shit. And then eventually they moved over onto what used to be like Norwalk Twin Cinema area. Yeah.
It's a Pioneer Shoemaker one.
I think it was Pioneer, but I could be wrong. But originally they were on Front Street at some fucking abandoned bank that they bought or something. Yeah, Norwalk Records was a shit, man. Like, and the Teen Angel magazines. That's what, like, the first seeing homeboys, like, all throughout LA. You know what I mean? Those magazines, like, fucking, I couldn't even believe those existed. You know, to have homies writing from prison, trying to get girls, and guys that do bad graffiti and fucking cholo poetry. And
I forgot about those magazines now that you say that. Damn.
Teen Angel, bro. Like, those are fucking... I look them up every once in a while just because I'm like, I wonder if they still make these fucking things. You know, they probably don't because they don't want to promote fucking cholo shit. But, you know, back then, that was the first time I ever seen guys from the north, like from, you know, North Daniels and shit, which my ex-wife is from up north. And I remember when I first met her, I go, man, you guys can't write for shit. Because I would see guys that were, you know, posting the pictures of their hood up there. And, you know, the gang graffiti in LA is something special. You know what I mean? Like, I used to practice those letters, you know, those homies really know how to get down and shit, you know what I mean? But sometimes I see the guys up north, they kind of look a little hickish, you know what I mean? A little, you know, maybe the graffiti wasn't so good, you know, but we're talking the 80s, you know, people weren't really super up on it yet. But, you know, LA was fine-tuned as far as, like, you know how it goes, man. I don't know how much graffiti is there now because I go back to Norwalk every once in a while and it seems a little calm, you know what I mean? Like, it seems
a lot of tagging, less good graffiti like we remember coming up. But yeah, definitely the tagging is still just out of control, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was doing graffiti, but I was kind of doing more gang graffiti. I was practicing some hip hop graffiti back in the day, but I was just not as good as I knew some guys that were really badass that would do pieces in the riverbed. I don't know if you ever remember that, but
of course,
you know, early in the days, the hip hop guys used to fucking do big burners in the fucking riverbed, which are pretty badass. You know, we don't have trains like New York, but we got plenty of riverbeds.
Yep.
Yeah.
Spent plenty of time in the riverbed in Bell Gardens in Bell, that little area right there.
Yeah, dude. And then you know, riding on buses all day, but just practicing letters all the time. I mean, every fucking hit up I'd see from guys from Norwalk or Neighborhood or Carmelas, I would like see a C I liked or a fucking A, you know what I mean? I'm like up just practicing all the time. I mean, that's part of the culture too, you know, as far as hip hop, like graffiti, you know, fucking breakdancing and fucking, you know, just the music itself, you know. We were on to that shit big time, you know. We like really took it to heart, you know, and also like we wanted to spread it because we loved it, you know. Like at first our parties were, you know, they were legit. Like we had DJs, we had you know, fucking, like, we had some DJs like Battle Cat, which was like a guy that, like, we all knew, but he was older than us, and he was already throwing parties. So we kind of, like, piggybacked off him. And then we had some rappers and shit, you know. But, you know, somewhere along, like, the late 80s, mid to late 80s, it just started getting violent, you know, like, where you couldn't throw, we were throwing parties. Yeah, well, the gangbang at that time, I know maybe the gangbanging hit, you know, peak in the 90s, but
92 we were at the worst. But yeah, from 88, 89, 90, it was building up to crazy where you go to a party and it was most likely getting shot up.
Yeah, I would just remember going to parties in other cities and, you know, I was fucking didn't know any better. You know, you go to these parties, you end up in some fucking neighborhood, you don't even know where, you know, you kind of know it's dark. And sometimes you go in there and you might see, you know, some graffiti on the wall. Like, where the fuck are we at? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, this is Hardin. Like,
yeah.
I never even heard of Hardin before. You know what I mean? Like Jimtown. I remember going to a neighborhood called Jimtown. I think it's either
Whittier.
a Pico or fucking Whittier. Yeah. And it was like one way in and one way out. It looked like the worst neighborhood I'd ever seen. I was like, why the fuck are we throwing a party here? It's like, who the fuck set this shit up? You know what I mean? And so a lot of times at the end, we'd get into shit with guys, you know, plus we had, you know, all kinds of different races with us. And, you know, yeah, it got bad at the end. Yeah. I left Norwalk in 89 just because it got so hot, you know, like just too much shit going on.
Yeah, let's go back to graffiti and tagging. See, I started tagging in the early 90s, and by then, unfortunately, all the tagging crews had started to add a 13 to their name. So I only stayed in it for a quick minute. But, you know, can you talk to us about what you remember about, and maybe who some of the big writers were back then, but what do you remember about, you know, tagging and graffiti in, you know, the 80s in LA?
As far as tagging, like I don't think it was super popular in Norwalk then. It was more of like a LA thing, like a downtown LA thing. I mean, there was probably taggers there, but they definitely didn't have any crews. Like when I left in '89, I don't remember really knowing any tagging crews. Some of the hip hop crews or like some of the party crews like that, we would do hip hop graffiti. Like I used to ride on all the Norwalk Transit buses, you know, but it was more all 8-ball Posse shit, and it was party group stuff, like kind of like free promotion for us, you know what I mean? And then eventually I would do big burners in the neighborhood. Like, so that picture that you seen on Facebook, there's a neighborhood that we used to hang out in off of Patterson, like by Patterson Square, not far from the city hall, where a lot of guys used to live there, and it was officially like peaceful out of Norwalk, but they really weren't all that big at the time.
Norwalk?
Yeah, it's like fucking right down the street from Patterson Square.
Yeah, still there.
Yeah. Yeah, and like that picture I took, there's a church that used to be right there, and like somebody was trippy that somebody was like, "Oh, I used to live in those apartments back there." Dude, I didn't realize how much people like would respond to that. Like I post that picture on Facebook for my regular just family and friends, and they all get it. They they get that era, but I couldn't believe how many people responded and remembered that era, because I think people just kind of forgot about it. You know what I mean? Like it's, to me, it's a valuable. Like, I wish somebody would make a movie about that era, you know?
Dude.
I mean, I thought plenty of times of writing a book about this. I wrote and published a couple poetry books, but I've always thought about writing a book about this era. You know, I even have a title called Smog Not Fog, but I just have never put pen, you know what I mean? I've never even got started other than just thinking about it and like, you know, crazy like, but as far as the graffiti, yeah, like it was more gang graffiti back then, you know? And I hit up at one time or another, I hit up a whole area, like on that Patterson area. I mean, like we were having a lot of problems with the police, and this is probably something I shouldn't have done back in the day, but I wrote a big old 8-ball posse and put one time stay out. And, we had some fucking serious problems after that. They were not going for it, you know, but also I had tagged up the whole fucking neighborhood, you know, with the 8-ball posse shit. And, I was at work one night. I used to work at LaFell. I don't know if you ever heard of that place before. There was like a fucking factory right outside of Norwalk, Santa Fe Springs.
Okay.
And I was reading the press telegram, the Norwalk paper, the local news, and I'm reading, somebody hit up between Patterson and blah, 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 you know, the 7-Eleven. And I'm reading, holy shit, this is me. This is all about me. You know what I mean? Like, holy fuck. They had a town meeting at the church there. It was all about gang graffiti. They had the gang graffiti people that removed the graffiti, and, you know, social workers and police. And, you know, we got to go in there and watch it, and they had all my shit that I did up on the wall. Like, you know, so yeah, but, you know, you're breaking the law. You know what I mean? Like it's all fun and games until you get busted. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, like tagging, trying to think if I knew any like people that were super into tagging, but like I said, I think that at that time was more of a downtown LA thing.
Yeah, it was huge in the 90s. I mean, so much so that it was on every Fox 11 channel, and they had specials about it and things like that. But yeah, it was a different time. You guys actually getting into 8-Ball Posse. Actually, let's go in chronological order with 8-Ball Posse, because there's a few different things that I was interested in discussing with you. So let's talk about the origins, and who are some of the original members? How did the whole thing start? I know we talked about it being a breaking crew, that's Wild Style, but go a little bit deeper. Right.
So like the guys over in Wild Style crew with me were this guy Kenny Wayne, his sister Venus. They were both from LA. A lot of these people were all from different places. Like I might have been one. There's a handful of us that were actually from Norwalk, but a lot of them were like people that moved from Compton, from LA, from you know, Bell Gardens, from wherever. You know what I mean? Like it was a mixed group of people. But my boy Kenny Wayne, which he's a black guy from he was from Watts, and his sister. They were both ended up being in LA Breakers later, but not at the time. But I met them in elementary school. Another guy named George Perez, Michael Sierra. So those are the original guys from Wild Style crew. But then eventually, like going to high school, we all got in hip hop. Had this boy Eminem, which he passed away, committed suicide. A lot of these guys are dead too, you know, like or have moved on somewhere that you don't even know where they're at. But this guy Eminem that ended up being a rapper, pretty big rapper in the city. You know, a guy named J-Lo, he was a Samoan. That was one of my best friends then. Bobo and David, they were brothers from the One Ways. So we literally had guys from all over the place. You know, I was probably the only one that grew up in the neighborhood. So, you know, what was cool about having all these dudes is that we would run into other people, and we always had a negotiator. You know what I mean? Like, oh, so-and-so's from, you know, so-and-so grew up in the One Ways. Let him talk to them. You know what I mean? Like, or I grew up in neighborhood. So anything come up with neighborhood, I'd be like, hey, I fucking know, you know, Silent from neighborhood and Little Joe from neighborhood. You know, we're always constantly negotiating this shit. But yeah, the biggest thing was just accepting all different races. Like we were so fucking mixed up that I fucking loved it. Being a half breed, I never felt like super comfortable being a cholo. You know what I mean? Like growing up in neighborhood, I would see how like if you're a white cholo or half breed, you might have to put up some shit. You know what I mean? Like some extra bullshit. And I just was like more always. And plus, my mom kind of raised me more. My mom was a hippie, so she was more into like fucking getting along with people. You know what I mean? So to me, I never felt comfortable just being around one group of people, Mexicans or just whites. I always felt great just being around all kinds of different people. And I thought that was part of hip hop too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And part of the whole thing is, you know, when I would see those movies about New York, I would see like, you know, a fucking Puerto Rican guy that looks white, you know, like a black guy, and then a fucking half breed, and some guy with red hair or something. I'd be like, oh, I fucking love the way New York is. That like a white guy could talk like he's, you know, like fucking part of the crew, and nobody gives a fuck. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So yeah, just man, it was a fucking great time. I ain't gonna lie, but
it sounds like a lot of fun, man. It sounds like okay. So half of the members were black. People thought that you guys were Crip affiliated.
Yeah, well, we got in the paper. They started saying that when we got on the gang, eventually got on the Norwalk Sheriff gang list, and from basically hanging out. And then some of the guys that we were hanging out with were committing crimes and shit. Like I had a couple of guys that used to rob people at Versatellers, you know, which was something that people did back in the day. Wait for people to go to a Versateller and rob them at the Versateller. So a couple of those dudes did time. So we started getting on like the gang list. And then a lot of dudes were homeless, or, you know, like a lot of dudes with bad families, you know. So like we would have essentially on Front Street, we had a guy from Norwalk named Chicho. His dad, Chaco, had a fucking pad, and he would let all the dudes just stay in the garage there. So that became our ditching party pad too, because that dad would let us party there. Every time we had ditching parties, we'd just pull up a car in the backyard and fucking, you know, jump the sound system and fucking have ditch. You know, that was another thing we had, a bunch of ditching parties and shit, you know, which I don't know if people really remember those, but they were kind of a big deal, you know, fucking, especially with hip hop and shit. But yeah, like they thought we were like a Crip affiliated gang, but also because some of the black guys that were in there, they were from Crip neighborhoods, and they would say, even if they weren't really Crips, you know, they would say, oh, I'm from Santana Block, or I'm from, you know, Beach Town Mafia, or whatever fucking neighborhood they grew up in. You know what I mean? So kind of had a criminal element that just got accentuated over time, you know. And then accepting other guys too. We started eventually just jumping guys in, you know, at Norwalk Park. Which once you start jumping people in, pretty much a gang. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you cease to be like a party group anymore. You know, before that it was like, hey, we just meet people, they were cool, or, you know, we had our core group of dudes, and then we were going outside the city, Whittier, Norwalk, Santa Fe, you know, and just meeting other people, and they thought, oh, this guy's cool, and, you know, bring him in, he's, you know, does graffiti, he's fucking into this or that. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much, yeah, just we sometimes we would call ourselves Minorities United. Okay. You know? Yeah, and we would have, I mean, I remember some guys that I even thought were Mexican, they would end up being like Argentinian, or, you know, a couple of dudes I knew are, oh no, I'm really Argentinian or something. I'm El Salvadorian and shit. It's like, oh fuck, I never knew, because back then too, a lot of people that were Hispanic that weren't Mexican, they might be Latin American, they would just say they were Mexican because they didn't want no problems. You know what I mean? I don't know if you ever encountered that, but that was pretty common back then for like an El Salvadorian or Nicaraguan or whoever is like, just, yeah, I'm Mexican. Like, you know, it was just kind of easy, you know?
Yeah, I've heard that several times from growing up in LA. So yeah, I definitely get that.
Well, that, you know, and Norwalk was fucking highly racist too. That's another thing. I mean, the cholos there were fucking, I mean, pretty much racist towards blacks, which is, but you know, racist towards blacks unless you're in their gang, you know. Really racist towards Mexicans from Mexico, which I'm not sure if that's the same anymore. And also white people, but white people are like kind of last on the list because they're just, you know, white people are there, so they're like, I think more the thing is being a half breed. If they called you white boy back then, that meant you're like weak. You know what I mean? Like, that's basically calling you a pussy. You know? So yeah, it was. I would say it's pretty highly racist back then too. But everybody kind of just knew how it is. You know what I mean? And, hey, we could all be cool on the street, but like, the main thing is that if we ever get locked up, you know, that's another thing too. Eventually, I went to LA County Jail, and there we could never mention. Everybody knew you can't mention you're from Able Posse. It's not like, because it's a mixed group of people. Like, so we all kind of knew, like, if I was there, I would never say anything to anybody about any of that shit. You know, it's kind of something. So yeah, as a gang, that could never last, you know, but, yeah, I mean, the party group stuff, dude, which was really cool back then, was, we throw these parties, but, we cruise Whittier Boulevard, you know, like, and then, I don't know how much the Boulevard, if anybody ever cruises the Boulevard. I don't know when it eventually got shut down. It
yeah, like they just reopened it. They shut down cruising for years, decades, and there were a lot of groups out there that wanted to bring it back. So as of just about a year ago, you could officially cruise Whittier Boulevard again.
Wow, yeah, because they were, at the time, they were allowing us to do it, but then there started being all these stipulations and all this other shit. You know, of course, a lot of shit happens. You know, we got a bunch of fights on the Boulevard and stuff. But eventually, people would go to Lake, like a parking lot for Leg Lake.
I could throw a rock and hit Leg Lake right now. I live that close.
Oh, really? Hell yeah. I used to fish there with my dad, too, which is crazy that we ended up in this parking lot one time, and they're like, hey, we're at Leg Lake. And I was like, I used to fish there with my fucking dad, And then Turbo Canyon, that was another one everybody goes to Turbo Canyon. But that shit got crazy, too. Like, one time we got into it with some people up there, and, like, a couple people got shanked and fucking died, and, like, at the end of that era, it just was getting fucking fucked up really bad, you know what I mean? But, doing that, the backyard parties, and then also getting hotels. That was another thing we did, get hotels in Norwalk, Anchor Inn, Comfort Inn. There were certain ones we would get that would just let you get them and party at them. They wouldn't even say shit, like you could party all night, have fun. And yeah, I think by the end of that era, all that shit was like coming to an end. You know what I mean? Like
they started cracking down heavy.
The Norwalk Sheriff.
Yeah, it just got out of control.
Yeah, I used to get a couple times I got brought in to Norwalk Sheriff for, being on the street, ditching school, or, who knows whatever. They're taking us in a lot. The narco police, back then they would wear like a green jacket.
Yeah.
They would just like say LA Sheriff on it, like, jeans and a green jacket and driving Novas. I was always driving Novas and shit. And they would just bust us on the street, take us in, and then they would take you to the gang part, make you look at a scrapbook. Fucking have a lot of my friends in there, and just, oh yeah, and I know that guy from school, but I don't really know him, and I had an alias too. Like I would have Dusty on my arm, but I would go by D-Bone. That was like my name my friends gave me, not a name I gave myself, just because I'm thin, I'm skinny. So my black friends pretty much just always call me D-Bone and shit, and that was my tagging name. But every time I would ever get busted, I would just say, oh, my name's Dusty. Like you have to have a kind of an alias if you're going to be tagging on walls and shit, But, at the end, once they start showing your friends in a gang book, and also they had a map of Norwalk, and they had the little area we hung out there right on Patterson as like our little neighborhood, that it's over, and then eventually I got fucking carjacked, in the one ways. It just, it was all for a reason that I probably moved here, and, eventually I had 4 friends who were murdered, one who committed suicide, and also, one thing I forget is another group of dudes that hung out with us a lot were the Norwalk Manor. I don't know if you're familiar with the Norwalk Manor at all.
Is it an apartment complex?
It's by John Glenn High School.
Yep, I know exactly what it is. Yeah, very
and
familiar.
right next to the YA, right next to the YA.
Yep.
Yeah, so that
where they bring you in, right? Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Go ahead, keep going.
Yeah. So I guess this was a fucking condominium complex at one time or another that didn't get sold, and the city bought it, and they just made it into like a project basically. And back then, a lot of the guys from the Manor used to sell crack in there. It was like a drive-through basically. And that gang was also mixed with blacks and Mexicans and shit, and Samoans and whites, just like us. But they were before us and shit. The Norwalk Manor. They eventually became the Norwalk Manor gang, but at the time they were called Norwalk Manor Boys. Well, I used to break with a couple of dudes from there. And when I got kicked out of Norwalk High School, I went to John Glenn for a semester. And thank God I knew those dudes, because I ended up just hanging out with a bunch of dudes from the Manor. And so those guys became our allies pretty much. Like we're 2 of the groups in Norwalk that both had a mixed race, group of people. So yeah, I don't ever want to leave the Norwalk Manor out of that, because I had a lot of buddies from there too that were just like us. You know what I mean? We're like kind of fluid with each other and shit. But yeah, man, it's fucking crazy talking about this shit.
Yeah, I love it, man, because it's taking me back, dude. I'm 47, so I'm.
Oh shit, you're right behind me. I'm 53, so yeah, you're right behind me. I mean, when I lived in LA, it was 213.
My first number was 213, literally, and then it went to 562. Yep, my first number was 213.
Yeah, I actually think there was an area code right before 562 too, and there was like 213, and I think there was some other area code they dropped in there for a second, and then I turned into 562 or something. Yeah. But 213, man, fucking. Well, at that time, that was all of LA. It was 213, which is kind of crazy to think now, So a lot of dudes would get 213 tattoos, and you could get those, has a 13 in it and everything, but you can still get it and not be a gangbanger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not a sur 13. I never got any of that kind of shit. You know what I mean? Like the tattoos I have nothing like that on it, because that's gangbanger shit. But
yeah,
that's some serious stuff. Well, it is. You know what I mean? Like.
Yep, of course, dude. Hey, I want to ask you about something specifically. I'm wondering if you have any stories, and this is a place I frequented a lot just to get my shoes and stuff like that, and some goldfish and a snake and shit. But did you ever go, was the Norwalk swap meet big back then, or was it even around?
The Norwalk Indoor?
Yeah. The one that they shut a few years ago.
yeah, the Norwalk Indoor opened up probably fucking the mid '80s, and yeah, it was a big deal because before that, I used to go to Compton Indoor.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the big indoor, and you take the RTD to on Rosecrans all
Rough,
the way
tough,
there.
and dangerous.
Yeah, the rough, tough, and dangerous, bro. I used to, well, a lot of my black friends, they were from Compton, so they would be like, oh, they wanted to show off, fucking, man, let's go to fucking Compton Indoor. And we'd get all our hats made there, A-Ball Posse hats. Like, a lot of dudes used to wear, in A-Ball Posse, we were Pittsburgh Steeler hats.
Okay.
And just put a 8BP in front of the P, and then put a Posse on the side. Like, even in that picture I have, one of my homies right there, one of my homies, P-Dog, he has one of those hats. Both those guys have Pittsburgh hats. And I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot we used to get these Pittsburgh hats. And, that swap meet, that particular swap meet, Compton Indoor, was all Koreans. You know what I mean? Well, the Koreans own most of the stands and shit. We'd go in there and the guy would be like, Posse, oh my God, Posse. Because we go in there and spend money and shit, The Norwalk Indoor was like kind of a knockoff of that, And I have a fucked up story that I lost fucking $300 in that in Norwalk Indoor one time. I was just moving to Phoenix. I was going to buy some fucking gear in there. And I don't know. I probably got pickpocketed. Who the fuck knows? You know what I mean? How do you lose $300? I don't know. But that's one of my stories from Norwalk Indoor. But you know what other swap meet, man? Fucking the Norwalk swap meet, but now it's called Santa Fe Spring swap meet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like that was a big deal going there,
man. Not every Sunday. I go there sometime on Sundays to have a beer and check out the bands.
Yeah, dude. Like back then, it was a big event. It's like they would have like fucking like a band or something, a bunch of aqua trucks. It's probably like a more shitty than it is now. I went there probably 6 years ago and seen a Metallica cover band with some of my cousins or something. I just happened to be in Norwalk, and one of my cousins was like, "Hey, just go to the fucking swap meet and check out like some bands or something." I was like, "All right, cool." And it was still fucking jumping, man. It was still fucking live, like, yeah.
Good times, homie. Good times. Hey, if you're ever next time you come to Norwalk, man, give me a heads up, and I'd love to link up with you and maybe even just go around the city with you and do a live version of this where, you know what I'm saying, you say, hey, this is where we hung out, this is where this happened, this is where I got arrested, this is where, whatever, so we'll talk more about that offline, man, because I definitely, I like doing the live aspect of things as well, especially when it's a town that I'm very familiar with, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, bro, I was all over that city. Like, I just barely got on that Norwalk thing probably 6 months ago or something. And, it's pretty cool because they'll show you pretty much all the shit they show on there. It's like, oh, yeah, I remember there's so many days. Like, hey, do you remember Spire's Restaurant? And I was like, yeah, I used to fucking work there. I used to be a host there for 2 years. It's like one of the worst jobs I ever had, like, like the Saddleback, the fucking, Tommy Burger.
Oh, shit.
When there's a Tommy Burger, and then there was a fucking Chinese dude or an Asian dude that opened up a Tommy Burger Jr. or something right down the street.
Yep.
I don't know if you remember this shit.
I remember Tommy Burger Jr.
Yeah, Tommy Burger Jr. right outside the One Ways and shit. Yeah. And then the other thing I brought up on there too about the One Ways is there was a liquor store in there called La Lupita, right? I'm not even sure this place exists. It was an Asian market, but as a 15-year-old, you could go in there and buy 40 ounces. They didn't give a fuck. But you had to risk your life going in there. Like I would be across the street at Excelsior and fucking look over there to make sure there's no cholos over there. If I had fucking, if I had binoculars, I'd be using those. But we were just like trying to scout. Like, is there any? No, just fucking run over there real quick. Get some 40 ounces and shit. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, that was a big deal too. 40 ounces, man.
I remember. Is that where 8-Ball came from? Because a lot of people think 8-Ball is a Coke, which in a lot of areas it is. But in LA, it meant a 40 ounce.
It meant 40 ounce Old English 800 because that's all we drank, man. And we tried to make drinks off of that fucking thing too. Like, we drink the Bloody 8. This is the early Michelada.
Break it down, dog.
The 8 juice or Clamato, either one of them, and fucking a 40 ounce and shit. But it's like, man, you would have to drink that shit pretty quick because as soon as it got hot, it would be nasty as fuck. But you still drink it because you're broke and you're a kid and that's all you got. But I had another friend that tried to mix. He tried to call it the Kenny Wayne. He'd mix orange juice with Old English 800, which to me is fucking disgusting. But I know people make ghetto drinks now. I see guys online that are like testing out ghetto drinks and shit, The other one, man, is the fucking Compton Boiler. And this is the most disgusting shit. It's like Old English 800, Night Train, and Thunderbird all in a vat.
Oh,
and
hell no.
Like, it's the most disgusting shit ever. But yeah, just get a fucking cup and you're going to be fucked up for real.
That's what it was about back then, is the cheapest with the most alcohol content. Cisco, all that.
Fuck. Oh, yeah, Cisco, fucking. I'm trying to think of some other ones that were fucked up back then. But
Boone's Farm.
Like 8-Ball. Yeah, Boone's Farm. That's for the ladies.
For the girl, I was about to say for the chicks.
For the ladies, Boone's Farm, yeah. But yeah, no, eight ball came from Old English 800. But yeah, I remember having an uncle I worked with he was from Norwalk. He was a gangbanger. That he told me one time, he seen a picture of the 8 Ball Posse, and he was like, hey, he got busted for selling coke in the army, so he did time 11 work. So he was like, I don't know what's up with this shit. You know, I mean, you guys are fucking selling coke and whatever the fuck. And I go, no, this fucking drinking Old English 800. he didn't understand the concept.
Easy
you know,
E song, I think it was, right? NWA song.
No, he was drinking Budweisers and shit. He was drinking Budweisers. But yeah, no, 8 Ball Posse. And then, you know, later, I feel like we were the first posse in that era around where that's at. But, you know, when I even looked at the flyer there's a bunch of posses that we had that were like in other places too. So I'd like to think we were the first. We probably weren't. But as far as Norwalk is concerned, we were the first people to throw hip hop parties. I'm almost sure. Because, you know, back then I kind of knew everybody that was doing that kind of shit. And we were the first ones really to throw hip hop parties. And I think that's what a lot of people like too. And we had a lot of broads that were into it too. They were like, oh, this is a different style. You know what I mean? Like, where we're wearing like fucking Adidas and like, you know what I mean? Like hip hop shit, you know what I mean? Like post breaking shit, you know, like sagging our pants a little bit, creasing them up, folding them under, like kind of being like a little bit anti-cholo, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it was just a different style. It was cool shit, but yeah.
What went into to throwing a hip hop party back then? I mean, did you guys have a DJ scratching and all? Like, what? Talk to me. Like, what was going on during a hip hop party?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's all about the flyers, right? So my boys would go to, which I had two guys that would take care of this shit a lot. My boy Kenny Wayne and my boy Junior J-Lo, my Simone buddy, my black buddy. They would take these flyers, get these flyers made, I think in fucking Santa Fe at some Lions Printing or something like that. Like, and they print all these flyers out. We'd deliver them to all the high schools, like Norwalk, Santa Fe, Whittier, Pico, you know, all the cities around there. I don't think we went to Hawaiian Gardens a lot for some reason. I think because the Garda's fucked up. So we never, for whatever reason, we never handed out flyers at the Garda. But yeah, handing out flyers. And then we had a whole DJ system with different DJs and different rappers too. So they would mostly just play all the fucking, you know, a lot of Two Live Crew. Hey, we want some pussy. Throw that first shit coming out, throw that dick, you know what I mean? Yeah, Posse's on Broadway. And then so they would mix in some oldies too, you know, and then rappers. We'd have like 3, 4, 5 rappers or something. Some people want to go at it with each other, or, you know. It was a shit. I wasn't really part of all that. I was more of a graffiti guy, and I had a 64 Impala, so I had a cool ride. But all those dudes were way into it, you know. I mean, we'd help them get the equipment and fucking set it up and break it down at the end and all that kind of shit, you know. I'm amazed at all that shit, honestly. When I think about it now, it's like being young kids and all these guys, my friends, putting all this shit together. You know what I mean?
Right? Like, now one person could do it, and with the one just computer, you know what I'm saying, laptop or whatever. But
back then it took a lot of dudes.
Yeah.
It took a lot of dudes to move a bunch of equipment around. And then, you know, there's a bunch of times we'd get into it with people, and we'd have to basically like fight people off and then fucking gather all the shit up as much as we could and get the fuck out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is a whole nother fucking thing. You know what I mean? And luckily we had big dudes with us, you know, like we were all teenagers, but we also had like some older guys with us too that would come with us and shit. So, you know, but by the end it just got really fucked up. I think the last party I remember we threw was in I think I was talking about Jimtown or what fucking that was the last time we threw a party. Jimtown or Hardin, one of those two. And we got into it with some people. One of my friends got hit in the head with a bat. Somebody was shooting off rounds, which I fucking bailed the fuck out. I ended up finding out it was one of my friends shooting off rounds. You know, but everybody scattered. As soon as you hear the gun, everybody scattered. But back then, a lot of people weren't getting shot. You know, like you would think. I mean, there was a death toll for gangbanging back then. Like every Sunday, there would be some death toll, but it usually was like cities more downtown, or you know, like it's not like people didn't get shot in Norwalk, but that definitely was more of like a gangbanging shit. You know what I mean? Gangbanging thing. Most of it was just guys throwing down, you know, hitting each other with fucking bats, or you know, maybe every once in a while somebody gets stabbed or something with a broken bottle, or you know. But you couldn't really carry a lot of weapons back then because the police were on your shit, man. Like every time you would ever get stopped back then, like the police, they take you out of the car immediately. They fucking frisk your car. Even when we were drinking, we would keep all the shit in the trunk. You know, we never had. My friends all knew the rules. You know what I mean? Like we would get stopped all the time, so you have to have all your shit, have all your fucking paperwork in order. You know what I mean? Don't have a fucking broken tail light. Like, you know, have all your shit straight. You know, don't give them a reason to fucking bust you. You know?
Yeah, they were ruthless back then, man. Definitely
dude,
a lot
Norwalk
more
Sheriff
ruthless
is
than they
no
are
joke.
now. No cameras, nothing. But you know what I'm saying? They would. Yeah, I remember that very, very vividly, man. Dude.
Yeah, I had one cop that fucking hated me, dude. Fucking Officer Luna. This guy, super racist. Like, I remember he caught me ditching outside of school with a couple of black friends I had, and then put me in the car, take me back to school, and was just like, what's up? You like hanging out with my others or what? And I'm like, oh, I hang out with whoever. I don't give a fuck. And he goes, that's not what I asked you, motherfucker. I grew up in Inglewood. I fucking grew up with black people too. I'm just asking you like to hang out with my yachts and shit. And I'm like, yeah, fucking I'm not racist. I hang out with whoever or whatever. This guy used to give me shit. Him and there's another cop named Duran. I mean, you remember these guys, man. Like they're, you know, but you know, I look back and I go, they're just doing their job too. You know, like I can't really be mad. You know, like it is what it is. I don't have any animosity towards any of these people. You know, it's like I'm still alive, so I'm just happy.
Yeah. I'm glad you got a chance to talk and tell your story, man. And I encourage you to continue telling your story any way you can. I mean, even if it's via podcast or YouTube or something, there's so many outlets because this history needs to be told, man. And I know we just hit the tip of the iceberg, but I definitely appreciate you coming on the show, man. Are there any last words you want to give? Any shout outs? I mean, anything you want to promote? The floor is yours.
The only thing I promote, if anybody likes MMA, I broadcast off a site called Twitcasting. I broadcast UFC and I show classic movies and shit. I used to do it on Periscope. I don't know if you remember Periscope.
Of course, dog.
Yeah, Periscope. I was pretty big on Periscope for about 8 years for showing fights. I did all kinds of shit, characters. This is my most creative time of my life, pretty much. But Periscope went under, and I've had a bunch of different sites that I use now. But now I'm at Twitcasting, which is pretty much like the Japanese version of Periscope. So Twitcasting at Fight Compa, FIGHTCOMPA. If you want to fucking see some free fights like MMA, you don't want to pay for them, and you don't want to use Stream East or you know, whatever the other one, Meth Streams.
I'm right there.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
I'm right there next fight, dude, because I'm done paying $90, $100, $20 for a damn fight. Forget that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I get people to give they donate money, and then I'll buy the real one. You know what I mean? Buy the real fights or whatever, and then they all make comments. I got guys from all over the world, and mostly Californians, Texans, people from New Jersey and Florida, and then some people from, you know, Australia and Ireland. It's pretty cool. I've gathered a nice group of dudes that all love MMA. So if you love MMA, you want to check it out, you want to talk a lot of shit, and I play music in between commercials because, you know, nobody likes commercials. So I'm doing my own DJing. Like that's if I never DJ'd, but I DJ on there. So it's all good.
I love that, homie. I love that. Fight Compa. Fight Compa. COMPA. Man, I'm gonna definitely check that out.
Twitcasting.
Twitcasting.
So much love, man.
Yeah,
really
most def, dude. Thank you. Thank you, brother.
Thank you for
so
sharing.
much.